Welcome back to Levels of Leadership Podcast. I am Dan Hines, owner, co-owner of Snap Fitness in Andover and Level Up Youth Training, as well as Level Up Coaching. I'm here to talk about a book we are doing this summer called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. And some of you may have heard of this book. It's a kid's book. It came out a long time ago, at least 10, 15 years ago, because we homeschool our 14 and 12-year-old, and we used this book when they were at elementary ages and have kept it in the house, and it's been a very meaningful part of our development of our young people in our home. As you guys know, we run a youth program both during the summer called our Summer Slam, as well as Level Up Youth Training during the school year. The reason I'm making this video is twofold. One, to kind of pimp our youth program a little bit and show the level of passion and thought that we put into this for obviously marketing material so that people have a little more information about what it's about, but also to showcase what makes us really unique in that capacity, which is our personal development that we build into this program. There's very little more important in our hierarchy of values than bringing into the world a generation that is going to be better than us. And in order to do that, we have to define what better means. And in order to do that, we have to define what we don't like about this world. And the reality is we have to have some pretty tough conversations, both as a community, as a culture, as a city, as individual families, and certainly to our children. I'm in the Gen X demographic. So, I grew up playing outside and playing with dial-up phones and using my imagination and being forced to socialize with other children. I got to encounter my fair share of difficulty growing up and had my fair share of failures along the way. Some things I was ready to confront and overcome. Some things I was not, and I failed miserably and had to learn along the way. We have come to a point in our development where, to quote someone much smarter than me, the only struggle we are actually experiencing right now is the lack of struggle, right? There shall come a time where the only struggle is lack thereof. And it's created this really new, fascinating and terrifying and cool and horrific landscape that we are now raising our children in. And the reality of the situation is if you live in Andover, Minnesota today, then you are a part of the top 1/10 of 1% in the world. It may not feel like that sometimes. We may look at our $60,000 and compare it to $100,000 and say I'm poor. But the reality is the average income across the world is just a little over $30,000. Okay, that's the top 10% is $30,000. So if you live in Andover today, the average median household is $150,000 and growing. Obviously, things are a little tight right now due to certain political situations and inflation, but I digress in that situation. The point is your children lack for nothing, and that actually is the problem. Now, some of you already have this figured out. Some of you don't. Right? It's very easy to go through life's little checklist of things that we have to do, starting with finding a suitable spouse and then having children, not thinking about what that actual sacrifice entails or why we're even doing it sometimes, if we're truly being honest with ourselves. It's just that next thing to do. And so if we were to look at it as, well, life is eternal suffering marked with mortality at the end of it, we might think a little harder about bringing children into the world, and we certainly might give thought and time to, if we're going to bring children into this world, which is a good thing typically, how are we going to prepare them for the inevitable pitfalls and ditches and traps and snares and heartache and heartbreak and and love lost and illness and disease and sickness that truly plagues and is a definer of human existence. And this isn't meant to sound all drab and dark and mopey, but the reality is all of us are going to experience these things, and we like to bury our heads in the sand and we like to pretend it's not going to happen to us. But that is that's part of the problem, right? And so we have taken a different approach. We've looked at the world around us, and Sarah and I are on the stricter side of things, and we don't invite unnecessary electronics into our home. We invite the necessary wisdom to manage said devices before we implement them into our children's life. Not to say that they aren't going to fail anyway. There's a lot of X factors, but again, I digress. The youth program, to get back on point, is really designed to prepare the child physically, mentally, spiritually, across the board for when they have to go out into the real world. And the reality is the real world, the truthful world, not virtual reality, not Facebook, not Instagram, not Snapchat, not TikTok, not YouTube, not these false personas of self-aggrandizement, opinion, false sense of friendship and likes and all these things that we like to paint our best selves with. But the real world truly does not owe you or care about you at the end of the day. There is nobody outside your immediate circle who is going to prevent you from having to make a sacrifice or overcome something extremely difficult. And what we're seeing along the lines of the mental health crisis, truly pandemic, if you actually add up the stats of social anxiety, acute anxiety disorder, moderate levels of depression, certainly if you just went off the prescribed pharmaceuticals along these mental health lines, and then combine that with suicidality, acute onset gender dysphoria and identity complex, that is all the rage of topic in the political landscape today. We have a crisis on our hands of children not knowing what to do with the world around them. And there's a lot of elements of why that is. And I'm going to go down a couple roads, but we'll probably have a more in-depth podcast regarding some of these in much deeper detail, because they could really be their own podcasts. The first one is they just lead perfectly sheltered lives and they're not being challenged. We like to throw out words like compassion, and kindness. And these things are great on the surface, but it depends on who you're being compassionate to. We become over compassionate. We become overkind. We are forgetting that there's a child and a potential that is down here 20 years that we need to be kind to and compassionate to as well. So while our children may not seem like they are happy or emotionally set in the moment because you're coming off like a tyrannical dictator, because heaven forbid you say no, right? We are actually serving this future version of our children. And we're saying, hey, life isn't fair. In our house, if you said life isn't fair, or it's not fair, or how come he got 2 and I got 1, or any variation of life isn't fair, from a moderate age, I want to say we started about 8 or 9, our kids would get burpees and laps and push-ups and different forms of exercise, meant as discipline and meant to teach them that absolutely life is not fair. And the only thing that makes the inevitability of life not being fair worse is you whining and becoming a victim about it. And that is in any circumstance, even the most obvious cases where you have really good reason to actually be a victim. Like, I just got a cancer diagnosis. I didn't. I'm just saying hypothetically, right? A lot of us are going to get that news. That's the reality. Everybody understands that that person has every right to feel bad or feel victimized or feel like life is not fair. But the reality, the hard truth is that feeling sorry for yourself in that moment, while certainly probably a part of the mourning process, is ultimately not going to serve you, and it is certainly not going to make that bad situation anything other than worse. And so that's a tough scenario to handle. That sounds really harsh. It sounds really hard, but that is the truth. And the truth does hurt. And this is where we've done an injustice, culturally speaking and generally speaking. And I speak in broad generalities, so I don't want this to be a lecture. These are just social trends that I've noticed and have built our life's work upon, trying to be somewhat of a counterculture or a revert back to that nature and nurture that is so necessary in the adequate and responsible rearing of this next generation, which is the root heart of what our youth program is all about. The gym symbolizes that thing that these kids don't want to get up and do this every single day. Are you kidding? Nobody wants to get up and do this every single day. It's a job sometimes, even for crazy gym nuts like me that actually open one. We don't want to get up and work out. We have a million things to do. We don't want to update our resume and actually put ourselves in a position to find a better job and negotiate better. We just want to bitch about the job we have. We don't want to make the hard necessary changes in our life. We just want to take that path of least resistance, right? And one of the reasons you're seeing such a massive, and I mean, the stats should terrify people. I mean, right along with the obesity crisis at 42% of our culture, right? Should terrify people. Like, why anxiety? Why now? Why are we all freaking out about things that ultimately don't matter? At least in the past, when we were being invaded or shot at or starving or looking for food or just trying to survive on our basic level, we had an actual area to put that natural survival instinct into something that was actionable. Well, now we have everything. We have food on every corner. We have all the stuff to numb ourselves out, but yet the anxiety doesn't have anywhere to go. So it's at this brand new level of chaos and we don't know what to do with it. Well, a lot of that is because we have been so sheltered developmentally by electronics, by not getting out and socializing with other children and learning how to play with others, by being inundated with ideas and toxic viral mind viruses through social media and TikTok, instead of actually being in our present lives and observing what we see. We're being shoved ideas that we latch our identities to. We worry about things we have absolutely no control over and wouldn't have even known about had technology not been readily available just a couple decades again. And really, at the end of the day, it's because we are so incapable of turning around and facing the most minute little anthill of something that could make us better or make us feel good or feel like we're moving along in our lives, that we make it into a mountain of how am I ever going to get up to the top, so I might as well not even start. I'm going to look at my eating. I'm going to look at my kid's sports schedule. I'm going to look at my job and how much I hate it. I'm going to look at my marriage and how I'm not connected with my husband or my wife. And I'm just going to go, la, 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 screw it. We're going to put on Netflix. I'm going to have something to drink. I'm going to numb myself out. And I can do that. And I actually can afford to do that. I can afford it financially. And I can afford it because my husband and spouse is doing the same thing. And my kids, they're not engaged because they're downstairs playing video games. And they seem occupied. So that's fine. They don't need me right now. In fact, it's really nice to not have to deal with them. All true. Okay? Well, the reason we picked this book, and ultimately the reason I'm doing this podcast, is this is a book called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. And this is a children's book that goes through the life of Billy, I believe. Yep, Billy. And Billy wakes up and finds a dragon on the end of his bed. All right. Dragons symbolize all kinds of things in mythology, but ultimately they symbolize the thing the hero has to confront in order to get whatever the treasure is that lies behind. Okay, so make that a metaphor for whatever it is, okay? Just had an example, not going to name names. Again, I'm going to use a lot of examples because I see this in my club all the time, but I want to remain anonymity. I suck at that word, by the way. Anonymous is another one that I suppose I could use. And that is, they decided to clean up this this object that was a symbol of the time they were going to spend together as a family. But that task was too monumental. It was one more thing that I had to do. Where do I start? Like, how do I, it's one more thing in a list of 30 things that I got to go clean up in my life. But this one was important. This one kept coming back. And it was just that source of metaphysical anxiety and weight that was wearing this person down. And that thing was supposed to be used to spend quality time with one of the most important people of their life, their family. So they finally went out and faced that dragon. The dragon was this, and it wasn't even a big dragon. It was a small dragon, and I'll touch base back on that in a second. Right? It was a moderately sized dragon that just needed a little tender love and care, a little effort, a little focus, right? A little order. And as soon as that was ordered up, and as soon as that chaos was made into something that could be used for that purpose, hey, we felt better about ourselves, right? We felt really good. And now we can actually go out and use this item for its intended purpose. And we can gain that joy of the time with our family, right? So the book symbolizes all these little struggles that we're going to face in our life. And Billy just wakes up with a nice little dog-sized dragon on his bed. And he's like, Mom, Dad, you got to take a peek at this dragon. Like, there's a dragon here. And they refuse to acknowledge the dragon. Now, this was pointed out to me as, well, I'll get to that in a second. So as you can imagine, with any problem that this dragon ultimately symbolizes, the next page, the dragon is not a little dragon anymore. Because we ignored it, because we numbed it, because we packed it away, because we just pretended it was too big for us to conquer. That dragon got bigger and bigger and bigger, and page after page after page, until you can look at the top here and ultimately see that the dragon is now taking up the entire house, even to the point where it rips the foundation off the house, off the foundations, and runs down the street. Now, that is a powerful metaphor, right? A dragon left unchecked, okay, is going to uproot the foundations of our lives. This could be a disconnect in your marriage. It could be an addiction to gambling. This could be a food addiction and heart disease. This could be an affair. This could be, just a job that you absolutely despise instead of, making a sacrifice and moving in a different direction. Okay? And the reality is as we get older, these dragons don't just manifest themselves in one area of our life, they manifest themselves everywhere. And the message of this story isn't that dragons go away. It's that we have to tend to them to keep them manageable. And and at the end of the story, the family finally acknowledges the dragon. The parents acknowledge the dragon, and it gets back down to the size of a dog. And now it's a manageable dragon. But the author goes out of his way to make sure to ensure we understand that there is still a dragon at the end of this story. It does not go away. It stays there, but it's manageable. And that's why we teach this book in our youth program this summer. In addition to learning all the things that you need to learn in a gym and a youth program that you would expect to learn from a well-reputable institution of training, physical training, it's important that these children and our adults and our audience understand that we find this book to be one of the major roots of the mental health crisis of today, because we are not preparing ourselves for the inevitable dragons and sacrifices necessary that we are going to have to turn around and willingly confront and battle in our daily life. Okay? You don't get to ignore the dragon. Okay? That is abundantly clear in this book, and it's abundantly clear in our lives. What happens if you have a cell phone and a video game and an online existence, never meet any people, never develop socially, and live in your parents' basement until you're 35 years old? You don't think there's a dragon there? Oh, you successfully avoided a dragon. You successfully avoided the dragon of having an actual competent, loving relationship. You avoided the dragon of having an actual meaningful job with something to look forward to outside the imaginary world of video games. You've managed to avoid the dragon of having to be accountable to your healthy or unhealthy life decisions that have now wrecked your body inside and out, wrecked your mind. Now you have a dragon that has chosen you. You haven't chosen what sacrifice you're going to make. The sacrifice has chosen you. You are ill-equipped to fight all of this. You are in such a hole at this point that you don't even know how to brandish a sword. You don't even know, like, the dragon has just become your life. You can't even distinguish what reality is or where to start or where to start training to take on one of these things. So it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy of getting worse and worse and worse and overwhelmed and overwhelmed and overwhelmed. And unfortunately, this is a very common story in our culture today, specifically with young men. So this book is meant to get at the root cause of what is causing depression, anxiety, suicidality, mental health. Again, there's more root causes, but this is a big one. It is our inability to actually go out and be confident in our ability to confront, and competent and brave in our ability to confront the demons, the dragons, the hurdles that are inevitably going to come in our life. Okay? And the thing is with kids, you have a chance to build that confidence and competence at a relatively, parallel level for their actual age and childhood development. Where it gets tricky is when you have a scenario like I just painted out as a 25 or 30-year-old kid living at home with mom, really truly just, or dad or whatever, parents, and not developing and not going out and having this ultimate adventure called life because we're too paralyzed by our inability to even brush our teeth or tie our shoes. Well, now the problem is you have a 30-year-old, 5-year-old. And it's really hard to look upon a 30-year-old, 5-year-old with any sort of grace and any sort of compassion and empathy, and certainly any sort of patience to actually back up that development of this person and realize, while they are a full-grown adult, psychologically they are a 5-year-old. They are not equipped to handle life. We have to slow this down, and we need to stop aiming so high. That's part of the reason why we're never going to start climbing this mountain. You're aiming at the top of the mountain. You are ill-equipped to even think you can possibly get to the top of the mountain. Instead of just going, here's a path right here, let's pick this one and let's start walking on it. We don't want to get to that path. We want to let the kid, when he's 3 or 4 years old, line up that jump. And even though we know there's a chance he might miss that jump from the couch to the ottoman, he's not going to go to the hospital. And this is a danger that he's capable of overcoming. And even if he misses, he's going to learn a valuable lesson. So I'm going to tell him, I'm going to warn him, I'm going to say, hey, I'd be careful. You better know what you're getting into there, kid. But it's your choice. Why don't you see if you want to make that jump? And then if he misses, he's not going to get any sympathy from me. I'm not going to run and hold him, assuming that he doesn't have any serious injuries. I'm not going to cater to his crying because he made a decision. In fact, the only decision now to make is to get up and make sure you jump a little further the next time. Make sure that you get back up on the horse. Make sure that you have learned the lesson that you can't half-ass this jump, that if you're going to go for it, you better go for it. Or maybe you're not quite ready to make that jump. Maybe you need to practice on a slightly narrower jump. Maybe we need to move that ottoman in a little bit. And let's build that competency and that confidence in your ability to clear that gap. And then we'll slowly, back it away. And so when I talk to parents, or I talk to my clients or my wife as we're kind of raising our kids in this arena, we are constantly trying to figure out where their capacity for dealing with real life is. And we're constantly trying to move that bar up and up and up and up and up, right? We're still aiming up, even though we're aiming at a moderate spot that they can handle. And hopefully by the time they're ready to leave our house, we've got that competency and confidence at a pretty good spot where when life knocks them around pretty hard, they still have a foundation of family and wisdom and learning and honesty that they can fall back upon to learn. We're not going to let them ever truly fall all the way down if it's within our capacity. But at some point in time, we don't really have choice over that. Life is going to happen no matter what. So to go back to the whole compassionate thing, right? The nature versus nurture, we need both. We have plenty of nature or nurture right now. We have plenty of warm, feel-goodery feelings in our culture. We're trying to bring back in this youth program that love of the future self, that nurturing love, that, hey, I love you so much that I actually don't care about how you feel about me in this moment. Even though when I see you, it pains me because I know it sucks. I know it sucks that I have to punish you in this way, or that you're being held accountable for the expectations that we put on this homework, or that you have to go handle your responsibilities even when you don't want to. I know, it sucks. I want you to just hang here and watch a show with me and cuddle up and blah, 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 right? But then I'm not serving your best self. Which version of you am I loving? And then we can get into a piss and match all we want about who's serving this child the best. The one that caters to the immediate gratification and immediate emotional needs? Yes, to a certain extent, for sure, to a certain development. But then the focus needs to become on the future version and their ability to go out and confront life. And that's what this book represents. Now, I said a lot in a short amount of time, and there's a lot more detail and there's a lot more nuance that goes into this. So I don't want, again, to come across as preachy or that this is the only way. There's a lot of nuance. The devil's in the details. I'm speaking in broad generalities based on the trends that we see both as trainers, as gym owners, as entrepreneurs, as pretty actualized leaders in our community, certainly as parents in our own home, and as people who have done a pretty fair amount, that's not true, an extremely large amount of self-actualization, humbling work inside for our own failures to launch, my own shortcomings and falls from grace, and all these things that I wasn't prepared for, and put in the hard work to get to a point where we can actually teach it, where we can actually do more than this for just our children, but for the children of our community. And hopefully what's happening when these kids come into our youth program is that we're simply just watering the seeds that are already being planted in the home. I certainly see that a lot, and that certainly warms my heart. And it definitely is a more powerful community service to the parents in our community that are already planting these seeds and just allowing us to be strong mentors in your children's lives and actually water these seeds. It's a lot harder when these seeds have not been planted and they're getting them for the first time here, because these seeds need to be planted early, right? And I don't mean 10, 11, 12. I mean 1, 2, 3, 4 years old. Otherwise, it's going to be somewhat of an uphill battle to reverse engineer the development necessary to truly provide the shoulders and the competency and the responsibility necessary for these children to go out and aim high enough at such a lofty goal that makes the inevitable suffering of life worth getting up every day and enduring. So if I seem passionate about this, everybody knows me, I'm super passionate about this stuff. And this is something that I firmly believe in. And it's something that is the heart and soul of not only our community and what we stand for here at the gym, but also at the root and the heart of our youth program that is just finishing up here next week. I just had the fun, although humbling, luxury of playing some games with the kids this week. We always have a game week near the end of our training program. I won't be a part of the training next week, unfortunately, as we round up our summer programs. But, you know, waking up after playing 6 hours of ultimate frisbee and kickball over the last 2 days makes me realize that there's in shape and then there's in shape, right? And I'm just, I am getting old. Let's just put it that way. But it was a lot of fun, and we really enjoy being trusted to actually embed this type of wisdom and this type of knowledge and development in your children. We appreciate the trust that you put in us. We're super proud of this program, and we hope that we're able to teach this program to gyms and different facilities all around the world so that we can bring this nurturing love, this deep potential for the people they could be back and put our focus where it really should be, where it's most important for every generation, and that is in the next generation. There is nothing more important than that, with rare exception. But in order to do that, we have to define what it means to actually be human. We have to define what it means to be moral and have a hierarchy of values that we adhere to. We need to be able to define that so that we can put our sights on how we build these children up to understand how they can reach these lofty heights of potential that we all understand we could be if we actually set our sights on it. I'm still trying to get to mine, and we'll probably be doing that until the day I die. So this podcast is episode 3 of Levels of Leadership. It is called There's No Such Thing as a Dragon. And this is Dan Hines from Snap Fitness Andover, Level Up Youth Training and Level Up Coaching, saying, level up, guys. We only got one of these. Try to do better than you did today, tomorrow.